Welcome to the Stop Faking Fine podcast, a show that will empower you to finally show up for yourself. It's time to stop faking fine.
Oh my goodness, Dr. Dan Sullivan, welcome to the Stop Faking Fine podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to unpack all the things ADHD. You talk a lot about ADHD, education around this subject, this diagnosis, so to say, is so dear to my heart because I think a number of us have it. A lot of us have learned to manage it. We've learned tools and strategies to either get by or excel. I think some people, we use it as an excuse to get out of things. And a lot of us, I think, maybe aren't even aware that we have it. So what makes you excited to share, like what brought you on this journey to talk about ADHD and to educate around?
Man, I'm going to try to keep this short. For me, it was, a personal journey, right? I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was, I think, around 18 years old, 17, 18 years old. And so a little bit later, right? Than a lot of kids, right?
Yeah.
But, it was just something I was sort of dealing with, and it just got worse and worse. And I just thought I wasn't very good at school. Mine was more of the inattentive type, right? So I would just kind of be more daydreaming, just wasn't retaining material. And so it's near and dear to me because I didn't have many options, at the time, or I wasn't aware of many options at the time, I should say that.
Right.
And so, my journey involved getting on medication for that, after basically a 20-minute office visit, right?
Tell me more, Tell me more about that. So when you ended up recognizing that how did you recognize that you had ADHD? Because you were not focusing in school. And by this time you were in college, which, just to do a deep dive, I mean, you were, didn't you play Division I hockey for the Marine Black Bears? Or the University? Yeah, for the University of... Yeah, the University of Maine Black Bears. I think you might be, and maybe I'm going to ask you, but you might be my first non-engineering friend that recognizes where I went to college, because I went to Michigan Tech and they were on the Division I hockey tour.
Oh, yeah. Yep, they sure were. I don't think we ever played them, but I think my first college game was at Michigan State. So I've been out that way for sure.
Yeah. I went to Michigan Tech and I absolutely love hockey, grew up watching, for Michigan Tech, hockey was the only Division I sport we had. So it was hockey, hockey. So for you, were you playing hockey when were you in college when you recognized that you had ADHD?
That was before college. So actually, for those of you familiar with hockey, I played 3 years of juniors, which is a league that, after you graduate from high school to kind of develop for a couple of years, get bigger, get stronger before going to college. And so it was kind of, right in the beginning of starting that process after graduating high school, that I, was, taking medication for that. And so I found out originally I just wasn't doing very well in school. I just kind of knew something, just wasn't right. I just simply wasn't able to sit down and read more than half of a page at a time.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was just, and I was just more, sports oriented, and I was, big into music as well at the time and still am. But, so those were kind of my passions, and I was like, well, I want to play professional hockey, so the school doesn't really matter.
Right.
But it got to a tipping point for sure. And I sought help. A friend of mine had ADHD, was taking medication. He's like, this is very helpful for me. Maybe you should, talk to somebody about it. And so, so long story short, I was on medication for the next, 6 years or so.
Okay.
It was very helpful at, helping me to focus. But it had a lot of side effects, right?
Can you share more about that? Like, what were the side effects that let's even back up. So you had mentioned that you were only in the doctor's office for a few minutes. So can you explain how that left you feeling? Like, did you go there for the medication and then happy that you had it? Or how did you feel in that moment when you met with the doctor?
Kind of when I was that young, that was, just talking to a few friends that had ADHD, and they're just like telling me, this really works, right? And so I just wasn't aware of anything else. I didn't go in there with any other expectations, really.
Yeah.
But now, there's so much more lower hanging fruit that obviously you talk a lot about, that, just from your diet, your stress levels, your sleep, your nutrient status, your genetics, supplementation that's targeted and individualized to you, can make a world of a difference. Granted, some people still might need to be on medication for sure. But I feel like there's a spectrum of severity, right? And I think I was kind of at the moderate level, right?
Okay.
There's individuals that are much more severe than I was. And so I was able to kind of move up that continuum, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And, after those 6 years, we'll talk about that more, I'm sure. But, I was able to get off of medication completely.
What encouraged you? What shifted in your mind to make you want to get off the medication?
So yeah, this was like in my early 20s. I'm in college at the time, playing hockey, planning on playing professionally, like a lot of my colleagues did. And
that's the dream. That's the dream.
That was
I love it. Sure. Yes.
So yeah, that was the goal. And then I started listening to podcasts. I think like Ben Greenfield, Dave Asprey were some of right at the start of those podcasts. I think was right around that time, or for me it was starting to listen to those types of podcasts just for, performance optimization, brain health. Right. I was just always interested in, how do I get to the next level? And so, yeah, they just kind of, we're mentioning brain health and like smart drugs and, different things, and how, taking Adderall for a long period of time can have some negative consequences physiologically. And I was just like, And then I got into a personal development journey during that time as well, in my early 20s. And a guy by the name of Jim Rohn had a quote, and I'm trying to think of what he said specifically, but it was like something to the effect of, what will happen if you continue to take the daily actions that you're taking 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And I'm like, well, do I really want to be on this medication for the rest of my life if I don't absolutely have to be?
Right.
And so that just got the wheels turning in college. And then I met a mentor who was in functional medicine. He was an acupuncturist and a chiropractic neurologist. Okay. And I just, through the, people that were connected to the hockey team, he had worked with, some of the previous team that had won the national championship in '99, and just, was kind of not on the radar anymore. But I found him and just went to him seeking, just performance optimization, see if he could help me with my diet, whatever. And he was just like, Dan, there's other ways to address your ADHD. And so your diet needs to change. And I'm thinking, I'm a Division I athlete. I've got a great diet. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right.
And so, through seeing him and working with him very closely for the next couple of years, that really shifted my passion towards health optimization, helping others with ADHD, and seeing that there are a lot of other options out there
Right.
for people besides only medication.
Right. There's so many questions I have in that. I love every part of it. So when you say that you had like the side effects, what side effects did this, what was, I forget what his name was. Did he raise awareness for you to be looking for? Like, what were your thoughts on that?
So side effects being that I felt very dependent on it. And so there was like highs and lows. I would take the medication. I'd feel really good. I'd feel really focused, but then it seemed like I would kind of metabolize it, pretty fast after a while, right? My body just adapted to it. So I needed to take more and more, and I was taking, a solid amount, multiple times a day, in order to just feel like myself.
Yeah.
And then, at the end of the night, you have to stop taking it at a certain point or else you can't sleep, right? Any stimulant medication. And so, I wouldn't take it at a certain period of time in the afternoon, and then I would get a crash as well. The other thing too is just in my social life, I would become very hyper focused on different tasks, on getting schoolwork done, on, and granted, I graduated, what was it, summa cum laude, straight A's basically. So it was fantastic. It really worked, and I really kind of worked really hard too at school. But I feel like I had blinders on to a certain extent, and I wish that I would have spent more time on my relationships with my teammates at the time. Just
Do you feel
expanding?
Do you feel like you would take, and was it Adderall that you were on, like with the stimulant, you would take that and then get hyper focused on the things that you needed to know that you needed to do. So you would get hyper focused on school and not focus. Like, I love the visual of the blinders, not focus on the other things. And in the evenings when you would stop with the stimulant, like, what did that crash feel like? Were you able to, what did you do during those times?
Yeah, it just felt like a low, moodiness, just not really wanting to interact with people. And, I would, you push through it, but I was faking fine.
Right? It's a thing, and we all do it. We all do it. It's a matter of recognizing, which is why I really appreciate having this conversation, recognizing where in life you might be faking fine, and then finding tools and strategies. Like, you did a pivot. So from hockey being your goal and to play in the NHL and, pursue that career, you're now a functional medicine doctor. So share with us, like, how did you make that pivot? Because you started to learn about natural medicine, you started to learn about alternatives. And what I think is really applaudable is that you recognized at age 20 or 21 that you were super dependent on this medication in order to show up for the life that you wanted to create, but that you knew that that was not sustainable, right? So how did you pivot?
Well, into the career of functional medicine.
Yeah.
I think two major influences. So one was the personal development side, guys like Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins, and I became like a voracious reader as well.
Yes.
And that's something too that I think the stimulant medication really helped. Right, I had a passion for that, and I never could really read before. So I was like, wow, this is fantastic, and this is great material. I'm learning so much about myself. I think that was one aspect. The other was I started to journal like daily. That was one of the recommendations that Jim Rohn had. And through that journaling over a period of years and reflection, I was able to kind of, it's a form of biofeedback, really, about yourself. You're getting feedback about yourself. So I was able to learn a lot of insights about myself and what I liked, what I didn't like, what I was doing, the results that I was getting. And then the other was meeting that mentor, Dr. Jay Graves in Maine. And through him, he was so passionate and is still so passionate about seeing patients. I mean, he was seeing all kinds of patients. And so I would go in there and, he would work with me, and then I would just kind of, it was funny. I mean, the office manager at the time couldn't get over it because I would just kind of hang out there because I just liked it.
Yeah.
I would be doing all these like brain-based exercises. I had these glasses on. I was doing the juggling and like the vibration plates to activate my cerebellum and all this stuff. And I was like fascinated by it. And then I would because I just wanted to learn,
I love that.
So spend more time there. And so yeah, over the course of my college career, my passion shifted, slowly kind of diverged away from the career in professional hockey to functional medicine. And then, ultimately I decided not to play pro. Again, I was kind of thinking more ahead, like long term, I could do that. I could roll the dice, see. But then if I want to pursue a career in medicine, right, since I've already played juniors for 3 years, I'm graduating college at 25, so a career in medicine takes time, to develop and to go to medical school. So I said, hockey's a stressful sport to play, right?
Yeah.
You're constantly expected to perform at the professional level, right? If you're not performing, right, you're out of there.
You're done. You're done.
So, and you can, if I wanted to have a family at a certain point, if you have kids, and you could get traded at any point in time, right? So I didn't really like that, kind of envisioning the future. And so that was another reason why I wanted to go into functional medicine. And so, so step one was basically denying a multiple opportunities to play professionally and taking a front desk position at, I think it was $14 an hour.
Yeah.
With Jay.
Yeah.
Their receptionist was leaving. And so I just wanted to get my foot in the door. And so that was step one for me. So I started my career as a receptionist.
That is amazing. And that is dedication. And your heart was in it. Your heart was in understanding natural medicine and how you could help people, right? At the end of the day, that's what made you so passionate about it.
100%.
If we back up to talk about the signs of ADHD, I am so very familiar because I'm positive that I have some form of ADHD because I can be hypervigilant about the tasks that I really want to complete, but procrastinate on other tasks that I just don't understand maybe how to execute them. And I don't think that ADHD by any stretch of the imagination is a bad thing to have. It's more of a how do you learn to function because your brain maybe operates a little bit differently. I can look back at my husband who passed away 10 years ago, and I'm positive that he had ADHD, but he passed away before it was cool or before we talked about it really in public settings, but it helped him. I'm positive that he had some form of ADHD because it helped him juggle 9,000 balls at the same time and pay a little bit of attention to each thing as he could. And you share that one sign of ADHD is being a workaholic, like appearing high functioning, being a workaholic. What are other common signs that you see in people that you help?
Yeah, so there's three different types of ADHD. So there's the hyperactive type, you have the
Mm-hmm.
inattentive type, and then you have a mixed type of both the hyperactive and inattentive. So with the hyperactive type, you're going to be seeing the uh, uh, just like the name, right? The hyperactivity, the fidgeting, the not wanting to slow down, the kind of constantly, blurting out, talking out of turn, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so some people will definitely experience that, just high levels of distractibility, not able to focus. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got the inattentive type, which was what I had more so, and that's more of your kind of not able to really activate yourself. You're not able to pay attention. You're just kind of daydreaming, kind of zoning out, that kind of thing. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then some people can have a mixture of both of those too.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
so I have a child that's more similar to your story. And like in elementary school during tests, the test would be blank, but there would be beautiful artwork written all around the test questions. And so the solutions for ADHD are like super dear to my heart because if we come back to your original conversation about going to the doctor for 10 minutes to get on a medication that you're on then for 10 years, and do you need it? Do you not need it? So when people come to your office, whether they have either of the three kind of ADHD buckets that you shared, what is your process to walk them through that, to understand that they have that? And how do you help your patients not just get the prescription for Adderall or for whatever you might get your prescription for, but to lean deeper into real habit change?
mm-hmm. That's fantastic question. And so, yeah, so I have a clinic with a dear friend of mine in San Diego here, Oasis Health and Medicine, and we we I'm seeing more and more, kids with ADHD, adults with ADHD, and so they come in. So some of them will come in already on medication.
Mm-hmm.
Some will come in. The parents are like torn because they're told the kids they're getting reprimanded in school. They're getting sent home with notes. The teachers are complaining, and they're like on the verge of do I medicate or do I not?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have other parents that, they just are not going to medicate no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, it's really a similar approach to all of those groups of people, in that it's the approach that we take or I take is root cause medicine,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's how do we peel the layers of your onion back to get to the root cause of dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of different contributing factors to ADHD and there's a lot of overlap, right? There's a lot of symptoms that you can have if you have ADHD that look very similar to other conditions, let's say, like
Mm-hmm.
hypothyroidism, the fatigue, the brain fog, that can also show up in ADHD. So can low testosterone in men. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So can, just being overly stressed, adrenal depletion,
Adrenal fatigue.
Cortisol
Yes.
adrenal fatigue, cortisol dysregulation, blood sugar dysregulation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that can look like ADHD and
Mm-hmm.
also exacerbate ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And so my job is to educate people on, I don't have a magic bullet for you.
Right.
But I do.
By the way, that magic bullet does not exist, right? Can we pause there for a second? Everyone wants a magic bullet for whatever the problem is, whether it's weight loss or ADHD or hypothyroidism. There is no magic bullet. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, some people, and I think part of it is just managing expectations too, right? You didn't get here
overnight.
These symptoms didn't come up overnight, during the last week. And so don't expect a 90% improvement in the next week of working together. So I think that's a big part of it. But yeah, I mean, I spend 90 minutes with every new patient, right? An hour and a half to really sit down versus the 20 that I got, right?
Right. Or 15.
Or 15. Yeah, exactly. And so I think we're in the age of individualized medicine. And I feel like a lot of people, especially out here in California, and I'm sure on the East Coast as well, it's just getting more and more popular with the amount of information, podcasts, guys like Andrew Huberman out there, educating, right? And it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so patients are becoming more educated, and it's not a one size fits all approach anymore. And
I think I
have to kind of.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just going on a roll there. So I think like that's a big key of how we're able to get really good results with people, is we take the time to really show up, be present, listen to them, and get their whole life story in terms of literally from birth till present day, right? Were they breastfed? Were they C-section baby? All that stuff really matters. How's the health of their gut, right? And all these things that really play a role, as you know. And so, yeah, I think that's the approach, the subjective, right? And then the objective would be the testing with the blood work, the genetic testing, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. I think what's really important to highlight is that you have to be your own best advocate. And in today's day and age where there is information readily available, like it hurts my heart to see, only because like I've churned through the medical system myself, to hand over your thoughts on your own life, your opinions to someone on the other side because they are a doctor at a medical facility and they're educated and everyone is out there trying their best. But whether you're spending 15 minutes or 90 minutes matters. What your approach is matters. And I think for each one of us individually, we know our bodies, our symptoms, like you were saying, your genetics, your family, your history. And a lot of that is habits that are passed down from generation to generation. For myself personally, when you talk about the parents that are coming in, I was getting beat up from every angle with a third grader, with a fourth, as he progressed through the ages with notes from school, because you're talking when it's not your turn to talk. You got kicked out of the classroom again because you need to fidget. And now we need a fidget tool and we need a rubber band around the bottom of our chair so that our feet have something to do. And there was a lot of really good intention, but not solving the root of the problem. And this, for me, all happened very soon after my husband had passed away. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't have the mental capacity to I don't have the mental capacity to like dive into this. But I tried medication because I felt defeated by outside sources saying, you need this, you need this, you need this, you need this. He needs this, he needs this, he needs this. And I can't remember, which drug we tried. It wasn't Ritalin. It was something else, but he didn't like it. So within a matter of 7 to 10 days, he was like, Mom, I don't like the way that I feel. And as a parent, I was like, this is breaking my heart because you've just turned into a zombie. So rather than being the cute, fun kid that I knew, I'm like, you're kind of shrinking. And I don't like that either, which is part of like my journey to understand the gut, to understand inflammation, to understand all of these things, because a lot of the tactics for stress and inflammation are the same tactics that you use to help your ADHD patients thrive, right? So
100%.
Let's talk more about the solutions that you're sharing. Like you talk a lot about L-theanine, which I love because I'm obsessed with these supplements and the different things. So what is your kind of go-to for the parent that's listening? That's like, I feel I feel this, like I'm in this situation. What are your, what is your inspiration? Like, what can you share? What are some tips?
Yeah, I think that, I always start with the lowest hanging fruit, right? The cheapest, the least invasive, the most bang for your buck type of interventions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think before we get into nutraceuticals,
Yeah.
I always start with, screen time.
Mm-hmm.
That is highly impactful to the brain of a child. Limiting screen time as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the age of the child. The smaller they are, the less screen time. That I was just working with a patient and her mom. She's doing so great. She's 8 years old, and the screen time was a big factor. And it was almost like she was going through withdrawals.
Yeah.
When mom took it away, the iPad
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Right? Because it will dump dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
It will just release massive quantities, and that will dysregulate that system. It's kind of just like, yeah.
Well, a lot of people that have ADHD have low levels of dopamine in their brain to start with. So
exactly.
They're looking for
that.
Yeah, you're craving that. And so it's, where can I get the dopamine hit? And as parents, it's so unbelievably socially acceptable for your young children to just be on their phone all day long. And we're now like raising awareness. Like I'm leaning into this conversation. I love it. Yes. Tell us more.
So yeah, and I think a lot of this is the way our educational systems are set up. It's making it very difficult for kids to succeed and parents to succeed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just everything with COVID, and people are having a really tough time financially, and people are stressed out, and parents are stressed out. And so I'm just going to give my kid the iPad because I just need a minute,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have kids yet, but I can, I can only imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's be like as a single parent. It's just so I get it. It's the answers are not easy,
right?
And so, but I think the more that we can get away from that, the more you can take your kids out on getting time in nature, to reset the nervous system, to resensitize the dopamine receptors.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, because we'll crave, people with ADHD will crave that stimulation, and then we'll actually kind of go overboard, desensitize the system, and then go into these highs and lows. What we need is to just drip dopamine. That's a term another doctor threw around, instead of dumping it. So we need that steady, and that's where the diet comes into play, where I really advocate for higher levels of protein, evenly spaced out throughout the day, is one of the most beneficial things that you can do for your kids with ADHD, is having a high protein breakfast, low sugar. That's also great for the adrenals, balancing blood sugar levels. Also for giving the precursors to dopamine, like L-tyrosine. It's can be found in protein. So that's one thing, is really stabilizing blood sugar, because in the event that they're skipping meals, which is very typical for ADHD, right? You want to really be mindful of that, and you may have to set up certain systems and kind of protocols in your life, or certain habits. Like for me, I'll have a smoothie almost every day, right? I know exactly what I'm going to put in there, high protein, some avocado, some frozen berries, stuff like that. It's very easy.
Yeah.
And so I don't really have to think about it. Right?
Yeah. There's so many, I have so many questions and so many like amazing nuggets that you've just shared. When we talk about ADHD and having lower levels of dopamine, and then looking for those dopamine surges, like even you had said, like, instead of being on your computer or being on your phone or your iPad, go outside. Like, having young kids play in the dirt actually raises their dopamine level. So there's a reason that they like to be outside in nature. It's grounding them and giving them that slow dopamine drip by just allowing them to get dirty. And 20 years ago when I had babies, I didn't recognize the gut brain connection, or I didn't understand the dopamine connection. And I was more like, stop playing in the dirt. You're getting dirty. I'm going to have to like give you a bath and do all of these other things. And like, that's where my, neat free brain went with, I have 3 boys, right? So at some point they were 3, 5 and 7, and everyone's a hot mess. But just taking a pause to recognize the importance of allowing them, especially when you have ADHD, to get outside, and the importance of grounding and being in nature and, having the dirt in their hands is worth the bath time, right?
100%. 100%. And there's so many like advantages of that we don't even understand. I know one doctor that I really respect, Zach Bush. He talks a lot about sustainability and the farming, agriculture, the soil quality, things of that nature, and how important it is for our microbiome to be interacting with nature, and how we pick up, a lot of different types of microorganisms that are very beneficial for the gut when we go spend time in nature in different environments and kind of breathe that clean air in. And so, we get the natural sunlight, which helps to produce vitamin D, which also has a positive effect on the dopaminergic system. And so, the exercise also, the BDNF that's produced by the brain when we're exercising intensely with, kids are sprinting around with their friends, and, they're getting the social cues. They're learning the facial expressions. It's a whole integration of multiple networks within the brain are just firing optimally when that stuff is happening, versus they're just sedentary, getting hyper amounts of dopamine released. It's kind of an out of balance situation there. So the brain isn't it's just not as good for the brain.
100%. And I can think back to like the elementary years with my son. And when he was speaking out of turn, he was hyper focused, or could be excellent, A+ at math. You put him in a reading class with a teacher that maybe wasn't as dynamic, and he's out in the hall, because he wasn't interested in the subject. But what he didn't need, and looking back, hindsight's always 20/20, right? As we continue to learn and educate ourselves, but he needed to like run around the building and have a snack of protein, right? So I want to touch back on your statement about for people, adults or kids with ADHD, why is it common for them to skip? Like, what is the connection with skipping meals that you mentioned?
I think there's multiple factors for this. People with ADHD tend to lose track of time, and they'll overestimate how much time they have. And so like in the morning, oftentimes they'll be rushing around just trying to get out the door on time, and will oftentimes be late to school or to work, and they won't properly plan. Right? That's the planning is all executive function, which takes place in the frontal lobe of the brain, where a lot of dopamine is produced. Right. And so if that's not happening, then you're not going to be perceiving time and able to plan very effectively. And so I think that's one of the reasons, especially in the morning, that people will miss, breakfast, will just be kind of rushing out the door. And then during the day, same thing. It's kind of a vicious cycle too, where then after missing breakfast, then blood sugar is typically going to crash, because they might have just had a coffee or energy drink.
That spikes their insulin and then drops their insulin. Yeah. And so now they're crashing. Yes. You're speaking my love language.
Yep. So and very well. So, and then, so then what happens after that? Then they feel like they need to reach for something to get the blood sugar back up, right? So then that typically looks like, a higher carbohydrate, higher glycemic index type of food to just quickly get it back up, which then leads into that same vicious cycle of crashing again. Or they'll get hyper focused on something and then will lose track of time, will be, they won't eat or drink for long periods of time. And then, so it's just, I think those are a couple of the reasons I think people with ADHD can really thrive on systems and setting up systems. And I've kind of done this with myself over the last 17 years or so, just different systems.
Spill it, Dan, spill it. What are the systems?
So, systems for your daily habits, different checklists that you might have for yourself, or goals for your, for your life, different life categories. And so I was using this thing for a while called the Weekly Rhythm Register by Darren Hardy. It's basically just a checklist. It's like the days of the week on the top rows going across, and then it's different actions that you want to get done on the left-hand side. And so basically for each day of the week, my schedule might have meditation was the first thing. And then I check that off on Monday, check it off on Tuesday as the week goes along. Might be a high protein breakfast that I get to check if I do it.
Okay.
And keep kind of going down the list and really thinking about what are the things that I need to do to feel my best? Mm-hmm. What's the 80-20, right? And so I think for me and for a lot of people, some kind of mindfulness or meditation or just time to just check in with yourself in the morning and just center yourself, center your energy. I think that's really primary. That could be prayer for some people. I think that's an 80-20. That's a 20. That's a really important thing to do. The other being the higher protein breakfast for sure, exercise for sure, sleep, so kind of evaluating what are those things and doing some reflection.
I love that. So it's the Weekly Rhythm Register. Is that what you said? I'll link that in the show notes. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it should be a free PDF. It's part of his book called The Compound Effect. Just talking about the compounding effect of daily actions, done consistently, how much of an impact those can have. I'm really a believer in that.
Oh, 100%. I am huge on habits, habit hacking. How can you get the most out of your day, and holding yourself accountable for the things that you plan to do. So back for the ADHD person that's every morning already out the door, we've mismanaged our time. We're late to school. We're late to work, and we're on the path to setting ourselves up not for success. What is a tip that you can share for helping to structure that morning a little bit better so that you create the time to make the food to get out the door on time?
I think it's, taking the time to reflect, number one, and realize that this is happening and that that's a problem, and that you want to make a change. That's step one. And I think that takes, listening to podcasts like this, taking the time for yourself. If you're listening to something like this, fantastic. Congratulations. That's
right.
amazing.
That's a win. That's a win. And it actually, if you applaud yourself, recognize yourself, pat yourself on the back for having a win, that actually is a dopamine hit. So you're creating that dopamine naturally in your brain by just telling yourself, Dana, you're doing a great job. There I go. Got some dopamine.
100%. Because, and I do want to just say something about that, because a lot of people with ADHD will get into this loop of hyper self-criticism and
Yes.
beating themselves up, and especially with kids, because they're just getting constantly told, like,
you're less than.
You're less, exactly, and then they start believing that, and the self-image changes. And so it's this whole process where that's why I'm really passionate about helping kids. I mean, obviously adults too, anybody, but especially the kids, just because the life trajectory, if that is addressed in a holistic and healthy way at age 6 or 10 or whatever, it's like, man, they could potentially avoid so much negativity and unnecessary suffering.
My heart is here because I feel like I have watched this path happen, and the negative effects from age 6, age 7, age 8, age 10, being told you're not good enough in class, you don't do good enough in school, you're not performing. Like, can you share a little bit more about how to intervene in that? Because for that child, your confidence is being chipped away one little bit at a time as adults say, you can't. And then you come home to a parent that's just trying their best. So it's not at all a reprimand on the parents, but the parent has worked, they're exhausted, they're trying to make dinner, they're trying to get everything going. And this child can't do the homework, right? Because they can't settle down to figure out how to do the homework. And it's just a perpetual cycle. So what are some action steps that you would share for helping to break that chain?
There's a great book that I've read probably 10 times at least, and I recommend to a lot of parents out there, called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. He's an MD. It's an old book, and he was a plastic surgeon back in, I believe, the 60s, back when he was doing plastic surgery on people that really needed it, when plastic surgery wasn't really a thing. And so he talks a lot about the self-image. And so in that book, he talks a lot about, and I recommend a lot, is visualization for patients, for kids, and for the parents as well. And so I'd highly recommend reading the book. It's a lot more that I can briefly discuss, but basically the concepts are what you visualize with clarity and emotion. It's experienced by the brain as if it's reality. Yeah. And so if you're a kid who's never had a good experience in school, it's hard to expect that. Mm-hmm. And so when you're doing visualizations, you get into a very relaxed state, right into the alpha state of brainwave activity, even theta, where you're more susceptible to kind of reprogramming the mind, right? If you're kind of at this beta high level brain activity, you can't really drop in to make lasting change necessarily. So that's a big piece of it, is relaxing the physical body, getting the tension out of the body, breathing deeply, getting out of that fight or flight, right? That sympathetic nervous system activity. And once you're in that kind of peaceful state, it's running yourself through, okay, what would a really good day at school look like? And just seeing yourself, how would a fully functioning child, adult, or if they're the parent, like, how do I interact with my child, more effectively, with more empathy, compassion, things like that. Mm-hmm. And it's doing that. It's building repetitions of that, right? And so going through the day and I'll do this every morning actually. How do I want to show up? And by doing that, you're building neural pathways in the brain that then over a period of time, and give it some time, right? It takes a couple weeks to at least of doing that to really start laying down new neural pathways. But once you do, you'll find yourself effortlessly during the day just
executing
those visualizations,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big piece of it, is because a lot of times we try to change and we try to it's very effortful. It's very, there's a lot of resistant energy in that, versus we relax in, we really take a step back, and we see ideally what do we want to experience.
Right.
Instead of what do we not want, or things.
What are we being told? Yeah. What are we being told? Instead, you're flipping the script and saying, how do I want to show up? And then visualizing yourself as that person, because at the end of the day, our mind is a very powerful tool and can help you step into being that person. I have a question about seeking conflict. So seeking conflict activates your fight or flight sympathetic nervous system, which raises dopamine, right? So is that why? What is the connection with ADHD and seeking conflict? I think a lot of kids with ADHD, I don't know too many adults maybe they do, that seek conflict, but I think that that's a common thread for those with ADHD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is exactly that. It is that when we seek conflict, that ramps up the central nervous system and does secrete dopamine, norepinephrine, all those catecholamines. And so that are typically deficient. And so if somebody's feeling kind of low, right, and they have ADHD and they don't have enough dopamine, that's one of those activities that they might seek out. Conflict, They might seek out going on their phone and scrolling through Instagram or TikTok to get that dopamine hit. They might, seek out an argument.
Yeah.
Another reason for that too is the whole self-concept. So I'm going to get a little deeper here. With that constantly being reprimanded in school, getting told that they're not good enough, if things are going okay or going well, that can feel uncomfortable for a child with ADHD who doesn't think they're worthy and thinks they deserve punishment, and they haven't gotten punishment. And so therefore they're going to seek that out unconsciously to fulfill that need or to act in alignment with who they think they are.
My jaw is on the floor right now. That is so powerful. So for the parent listening, that instead of now we want to reprimand that child, can you speak to the parent? How do we change this dynamic in our homes so that we are part of the solution instead of adding to the problem and then creating more dopamine, because now the child has done something and now they're getting our reaction, the exact reaction they were looking for. We stepped right into the trap and we're right here, giving you that dopamine hit. Yeah. How can we interject and not do that?
I think it comes from what I was saying earlier, is that reflection in the parent. And it is listening to a podcast like this to seek out ways of doing things better.
Yeah.
Right. We're all on a mission to do better. And I think understanding that and then taking action, right, executing on the new knowledge is such an important thing. So if I have any advice for parents out there, it's okay, as you're listening to this, I would encourage you to be writing some of these things down, or at least, some of the actionables, right? That's what's going to change your life is things getting implemented, not just listening to this and resonating with it. And so I think that a lot of that reprimanding energy comes out of the parent not being in a good place, in a grounded place themselves. And so I think that my advice would be for parents to take care of your own energy, to be able to, and again, I don't know your situation, whether that's you need to be sleeping more, or you need to be taking a little bit more time for yourself. You need to be meditating for a couple minutes a day. You need to be taking a break. Like I'll do this, I'll take 5 minutes in the car after work to just kind of like reset, to leave work at work, and then go home. And then you have just more presence just to be spent with your child.
That is so hard right now. It's so hard because everyone brings their work home. You have your phone right here and you're ready to reply at any moment in time. So being aware, right? I love the 5-minute rule before you walk in the door. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I think the phone too, like the hyper, just being available all the time is also a big problem too. Cause it's like your focus is divided and you're just always on call. And you have less resources to give to your family and to show up in a grounded way. So I think it's just, it depends on where you're at, but doing some reflection and saying, okay, like what is one thing that I could do in the next 24 hours that I think will make a positive impact, and then do it and then reflect on that later that night and say, oh, I did notice a shift there, and just kind of keep going.
Oh my gosh, this conversation has been amazing. I love the micro habits. Like what's one thing that you can do today to make a bigger impact on your tomorrow? And if I can recap the feverish notes I've been taking, but for the ADHD child, adult, for the ADHD mind, like prioritizing protein in the morning. So what can you do tomorrow when you get up to organize your day? Maybe it's set an alarm, do something that is going to allow you to have that protein before you get out the door. Prioritize your nutrition, really think about your habits, think about the screen time, the amount of time that you're sleeping. I am obsessed with habits and like wind down routines and morning routines and having the gratitude. But I think the biggest takeaway is raising your own awareness and empowering yourself to say, okay, I am going to, if you have a child that has ADHD and you typically don't have breakfast, I feel like in my own experience, which you've really opened my eyes to, I have a child, I think, that invented intermittent fasting. And now I'm recognizing that you didn't invent intermittent fasting, you've mismanaged your time. And so I've been the parent frustrated at an 8-year-old that I'm like, I made breakfast and you didn't eat it. So now I'm going to stop making it because you're not eating it, when I had the opportunity, had I had the skill to turn it around, to maybe guide him to the table to say it's time to eat. And just talking about this, I think, is so important.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I'm so, grateful for my journey and having been through this personally to be able to relate to people that have it and the challenges. But yeah, it's really rewarding though. Like there's, one of my patients just last week or a couple of weeks ago, she came in and her and her mom came in for a visit, and they haven't gotten any notes home from school in the last 3 months.
Oh yeah.
It was like several a week, missing school and stuff. She used to go to the bathroom like a couple times a week, right? Which is a big problem. Now she's going every single day. They've really gotten a handle on the screen time. She's doing so much better there. It's just that's so rewarding for me, because and again, like we said, it's not just like those benefits in the here and now, but what is that going to do for her 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
Right.
her implementing these habits and not ever encountering all this unnecessary negativity from teachers and all that stuff, like moving forward, she's just in such a better place now that I feel like, if you're a parent, I'd highly suggest, seeking out somebody. I'd love to work with you myself, shameless plug.
For sure. And I will link link all of the places in the show notes. So we'll be able to find you quick and ready. But yes, finding someone that you can partner with that can bring you on the journey that you want to be on, rather than fighting the journey that you're being told to take, right? The medication that you were on that has side effects over the long term, but really breaking down the habits. And you helped this child with nutrition and habits.
Yep. And then, granted, we also did some blood work for her that was important. And so we did note some key nutrient deficiencies, some different imbalances that she had that was making the changes an uphill battle. So by addressing those things too, that was also a tremendous help.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your heart, your journey, all of the things. I will link everything Dr. Dan Sullivan in the show notes. We can find you on Instagram at Dr. Dan Sullivan, correct? Yep. And Oasis. Yeah. And Oasis Health and Medicine. Yes. We will put all of the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for just being here, for sharing your story, and for sharing the tactical tips that we can implement in our homes today in order to make a more successful ADHD journey tomorrow. I just really appreciate you being here.
You're so welcome. It was such a pleasure. I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.